Chapter 15. They're capable of changing the world? Why is it, Anastasia, that every time you speak of your forebears, you always talk about mothers, about women? As for men, your forefathers, I hardly hear anything. It's as though the fathers in your line were all insignificant. Or maybe your genetic code or your ray doesn't allow you to feel your male ancestors. Isn't that a bit insulting toward your forefathers? I can feel and see the deeds of my forefathers just as I can my foremothers, when I want to, but I am far from being able to understand all their deeds, or to determine their significance for the present day, for me and everyone else. Tell me at least about one of your forefathers whose deeds you don't fully comprehend. As a woman, you find it harder to understand men. It'll be easier for me, seeing I'm a man. If I understand, then I can help you understand too. Yes, of course, I shall tell you about my forefather who was able not to discern, but also to produce living substances of a power greater than all the weapons known, either today or in the future. Nothing manufactured could ever withstand them. They are capable of changing the earthly world, of destroying galaxies, or even creating whole new worlds. You must be joking. And where is this gadget today? Any man living on the earth today is capable of producing it, provided he can understand, and can feel. My forefather revealed part of the mystery to the Egyptian priests. Even today, earthly rulers in their political states govern according to the system and mechanism established by those priests. But now there is less and less understanding of the meaning and the mechanism of government. This mechanism was not perfected, and has become degraded over the centuries. Hold on a minute there. You're saying that today's presidents rule their countries according to a system or directions worked out by the priests of our ancient Egypt? Since that time, Vladimir, nobody has ever contributed anything significant of their own to the system of government, and today's earthly states have no conscious awareness of how the government of human society works. Now that's simply too hard to believe. Can you try taking me through the whole thing step by step? I shall try taking you through it all step by step, and you try to understand. Tens of thousands of years ago, before the world witnessed the grandeur of Egypt, when no state like that yet existed, human society was divided into a multitude of tribes. My forefather and foremother's family lived apart from human society. They lived according to their own laws. They were surrounded in their glade by everything as it was back in their pristine origins, as in paradise. My foremother, a beauty herself, had 2 sons. One of them was the orb of day, which as it rose into the sky awakened everything to life. The other was her chosen one. She was always up first. She bathed in the stream and warmed herself in the rising sun. The light of joy was something she always shared with everything around, and she waited. She waited for him to awaken, her loved one. As he awoke, she caught his first glance. When their glances met, it was as though everything around them fell into a trance. Love and trembling, comfort and ecstasy were excitedly taken in by the space around them. The day passed by in joyful duties, and each time the sun began sinking towards sunset, my forefather always watched thoughtfully, and then he sang. My foremother listened to his singing with hidden ecstasy in her heart. Back then she did not understand how the words interwoven into the song were forming a new image, an extraordinary image. More and more often she felt like hearing about it. And as though feeling my foremother's desire, my forefather sang about it again and again. And each time he sang, he outlined the unusual features more and more distinctly. The invisible image came to dwell among them. One morning, upon awakening, my forefather did not encounter the glance of love that he usually did. He was not surprised. He quickly rose and headed into the forest. In a secluded spot he caught sight of my foremother, enfolded in silence. She was standing there all by herself, leaning against a cedar tree. Enfolded in silence, she felt my forefather put his hands on her shoulders. She kept her moist eyes lowered instead of raising them to look at him. He lightly touched a tear running down her cheek and said tenderly to her, "I know, you are thinking about it, my beloved. You are thinking about it, and you are not to blame for that. The image I created is invisible. It is invisible, but you love it more than you love me. You are not to blame for that, my beloved. I am going away. I am going now, out among the people. I have been able to discern how splendid images are created. I shall tell the people about that. What I know, others can know too, and the splendid images will lead people into the pristine garden. There is nothing more powerful in the universe than the substance of living images. The image I created has proved itself even stronger than your love for me. Now I shall be able to create grand images, and these images will serve people." My foremother's shoulders trembled, and a trembling voice whispered, "But why? You, my beloved, have created an image which I love. It is invisible, but you who are visible are going to be leaving me. Our child is already stirring within me. What shall I tell him about his father? The splendid images will create a splendid world. Our son will picture to himself, as he grows, the image of his father. If I am able to become worthy of the image pictured by my son, then my son will recognize me. If I am not worthy of his conception, I shall stay on the sidelines so as not to interfere with his aspiration to the dream, the splendid dream." Incomprehensibly to my foremother, my forefather went away. He came to the people. He came with a grand discovery enthralled. He came for the sake of his future sons and daughters in an aspiration to create a splendid world for all. Chapter 16. An Extraordinary Power. It transpired in those days that the tribes of people living on the earth engaged in frequent frays, and every tribe planned to raise as many warriors as it could. And among the warriors, any that aspired to the culture of the land or the culture of the poetry were looked down upon. And each tribe had its priests, who essayed to make the people afraid, but none of them had any clear goal. They simply found solace in others' fear. And each one flattered his own pride by telling himself he was receiving from God more of something than his fellows. My forefather managed to assemble a group of poets and priests from a number of different tribes. There were 19 in all, 11 poet-singers, 7 priests, and my forefather. They got together in a deserted, isolated spot. The singers sat with meek faces to one side, while the priests took their places with a show of pride. My forefather addressed them as follows. "The tribes can be made to cease their enmity and war, and all the peoples will then come to live in a single state. They will have a single just ruler, and every family will be saved from the horrors of war. People will start to offer each other help, and the brotherhood of people will find their way to the garden of their pristine origins." At first, the priest simply laughed at my forefather, telling him he was daft. Who will voluntarily surrender his power and authority to another? If all tribes are to come together, one of them must become the strongest and overcome the others. And here you conceive of there being no more war? Your words are too naive to ponder. Why have you gathered us together, you slow-witted wanderer? And the priests began to leave, but my forefather stopped them by saying, "You are wise men, and your wisdom is needed to make laws for human society. I can give each one of you such power that no weapon made by human hand can withstand it. If you cherish it and use it for a good trust, it will help everyone reach their goal, come to the truth, to a bright sunrise that is blissful and grand. But if its possessor lusts in his soul to fight others with an evil intent, he himself will perish." This reference to extraordinary power arrested those priests in their tracks, whereupon the high priest proposed to my forefather, "If you know of such an extraordinary power, tell us about it. And if this power actually works and is capable of creating whole states, you will stay and live with us in that state. Together we shall create laws for human society." This was precisely why I came to see you, to tell you about this extraordinary power, my forefather replied to all. "But first I would ask you to nominate a ruler from among all those known to you, a ruler who is kind, whose mind is free from greed, who lives with his family in love, and as to war has not a single thought thereof." The high priest mentioned to my forefather in reply that there was indeed a ruler who studiously avoided all contentions. But his tribe was small in terms of numbers, and since there was no tendency to glorify its warriors, this was something few among them aspired to become. And so, to avoid conflicts, they were often required to change their base and move on, abandon a place that was more suitable for living, and settle in a less favorable space. This ruler's name was Egypt. "Then Egypt shall this state be called," my forefather said. "I shall now sing you 3 songs. You, my dear poet-singers, shall sing these songs to people in all different tribes. And you, my dear priests, shall settle yourselves among the people of Egypt. Families from all over will be drawn to you, and you shall greet them with good laws." Whereupon my forefather sang 3 songs to those gathered. In the first song he formed the image of a just ruler, calling him Egypt. The second song conveyed the image of a happy people living together in harmony. The third song was the image of a loving family with happy children, fathers, and mothers residing in this extraordinary state. The songs were made up of ordinary words already familiar to everyone, but the words were combined in such a way as to cause their listeners to hang on each new combination with bated breath. And then there was the captivating melody in the resonant voice of my forefather. It beckoned and called, fascinated and created living images. At that time there was still no outward Egyptian state. Its temples had not yet been built, but my forefather could tell that it would all come about as a result of the calling of man's thought and dream, melding into one. And my forefather was enthralling in his song, inspired by the extraordinary power with which our grand Creator has endued us all. He sang as one who possessed this power, a power that distinguishes man from everything else, that gives man dominion over all, that allows man to be recognized not only as the Son of God, but as a Creator too. Now, fervent with inspiration of their own, the poet-singer sang these 3 songs amongst the various tribes. The people were fascinated by the splendid images created, and came from all over to dwell with the tribe of Egypt. Just 5 years later, out of this very small tribe, the state of Egypt was born. All the other tribes which had earlier vaunted themselves above their neighbors simply fell apart, and there was nothing the war-inclined rulers could do to stop it. Their authority weakened and disappeared completely. They were defeated by something, but there was no war. Accustomed to material conflicts, they had no idea of the power the images held over all. Images that delighted people's souls and fascinated their hearts. In the face of but a single image, provided it is genuine and untainted by mercenary interests, all the armed troops of the earth are useless, whether they carry spears or any other deadly weapons. Before this image, all warriors fall to the ground, powerless. The Egyptian state grew and increased in strength. Its ruler was dubbed Pharaoh by the priests. Ensconced in their temples away from the everyday bustle of mankind, they made laws, which even the ruling Pharaoh was obliged to follow, and every ordinary citizen was only too glad to carry them out, and each one aspired to live his life in conformity with the image. My forefather lived among the high priests in the main temple, and for 19 years the priests paid heed to him. They aspired to study the supreme science of all sciences, to learn how to create grand images. My forefather was inspired with the best of intentions and sincerely endeavored to explain everything to them. Whether they understood it fully or only in part is no longer clear, and it does not really matter all that much. Then one day, after 19 years, the high priest called a meeting of his inner circle of priests. They filed into the main temple with solemn dignity, a temple which even the pharaoh was not allowed to enter. The high priest took his place on the throne, while all the rest sat at his feet. My father smiled as he sat there among those priests. He was immersed deeply in thought, composing yet another song, either creating a new image or perhaps rejuvenating an old one. The high priest addressed the gathering as follows. We have learned a grand science indeed, one that allows us to rule all the world, but in order to perpetuate our reign, we must ensure that not one grain of it goes beyond these walls. Now we must create our own tongue and communicate exclusively in it amongst ourselves, lest any of us let something slip even by chance. Over the ages we shall circulate among the people a multitude of treaties, at which everyone may marvel and think that it has all been set forth. And we shall set forth a multitude of marvelous sciences and various discoveries in such a way that both the rulers and the common people will move further and further away from what is important, and so that wise men in the centuries to come may amaze others with their sagacious treaties and sciences. Moving further and further away from what is important themselves, they will lead others in the same direction. So be it, they all agreed with the high priest, with the exception of my forefather, who alone remained silent. And the high priest continued, There is one question requiring our urgent attention. Over the past 19 years, we have learned how images are created. Any one of us is now capable of creating an image that can change the world, destroy or strengthen a state, and yet the secret of the power itself has never been revealed. Can any of you tell me why the images each of us creates vary in power? And in terms of time, why does it take us so long? The priests were silent. None of them knew the answer. The high priest went on, ever so slightly raising his voice, and the scepter trembled ever so slightly in his hand as he told those assembled. In the meantime, there is in our midst one who is capable of creating images very rapidly, and the power of these images remains unsurpassed. For 19 years now he has been teaching us, but there remains much that he has yet to tell. Now we must realize that we are not all equal among ourselves. It matters not who holds what rank among us, but everyone should know that there is one among us who holds the power to control in concealment, unseen, in his sway. With power of the images he is capable of creating. He can elevate or slay. One among us is capable of deciding the fate of nation-states. I, as high priest, am empowered to alter the balance of power. The doors of the temple wherein we sit are closed. A loyal guard stands outside the door and will open it to no one except on my command. The high priest rose from his throne, and with heavy steps, striking his scepter against the stone slabs of the floor, headed toward my forefather. In the middle of the hall he suddenly halted and addressed my forefather. Now, you shall choose one of two paths. Here is the first. You shall now reveal before us all what you have concealed, the secret behind the power of your images. You shall tell us how and by what means they are created, and then you shall be proclaimed a priest second only to me, and upon my departure you shall become first. All living people will bow before you. But if you do not reveal your secret to us, a second path will be yours. It leads only to that door. Whereupon the high priest pointed to the door leading out of the temple hall into the tower, in which there were no windows nor supplementary exterior doors. This high tower with smooth walls did have an exterior platform up above, from where on an appointed day once a year my forefather, or some other priests, would sing to an assembled crowd. Still pointing to the tower door, the high priest added, "You shall go in through that door and never come out of it. I shall command the door to be walled up, leaving only a small opening through which you will receive a daily minimum of food. When the time comes for people to gather by the tower, you shall go out to greet them from the platform up above. You shall go out, only you shall not sing nor create any images. You shall go out so the crowd will see you and not become concerned or spread rumors surrounding your disappearance. You shall be allowed to greet the people with words only. If you should dare sing a song to create images, even a single song, you shall be deprived of food and water 3 days long. For 2 songs you shall not receive food or water 6 days long, which means you will be decreeing your own death. Now decide and tell us clearly which of these 2 paths you have chosen." My forefather now calmly rose from his place. His face betrayed neither fear nor rebuke. Only a sense of sorrow lay gently on his furrowed brow. As he made his way past the priests sitting in his row, he looked each one of them in the eye, and in each pair of eyes he beheld the thirst for knowledge. But not only the thirst for knowledge, greed itself glared at him from each pair of eyes. Then my forefather went up close to the high priest and stared him in the eye. The gray-haired high priest in turn did not take his eyes off my forefather, eyes which likewise burned with greed. Striking his sceptre against the stone floor, he sternly repeated to my forefather's face, saliva foaming in his mouth, "Hurry up and decide which of the 2 paths is your choice." My forefather's voice betrayed no fear as he calmly replied, "Perhaps it is the will of fate, but I choose a path and a half." "How can you choose a path and a half?" exclaimed the high priest. "Do you aim to make fun of me, and all those who are currently in the great temple?" My forefather went over to the tower door, then turned and replied to all, "Believe me, I would not even think of making fun of you or offending you. At your will I shall enter into the tower for good, but before I go I shall reveal to you the secret as best as I can, and I know that it is not my reply that will bring me the second path. That is how it turns out that my choice is a path and a half." "So tell us, do not halt or waste time." The voices of the priests, leaping up from their seats, rang even stronger through the vaulted arches of the great hall. "Where is the answer to the secret? Keep it from us no longer," they begged. "It is in an egg," my father calmly replied. "In an egg? What egg? What are you talking about? Out with it." The assembled priests kept plying my forefather with questions, and he responded, "A hen's egg will bring forth a hen's chicken. A duck's egg will give birth to a duckling. An eagle's egg will bring an eagle into the world. Whatever you feel yourselves to be, that is what you will bring forth." "I feel. I am a creator," the high priest all at once professed. "Tell us how to create the image that is stronger than all the rest." "That is not the truth," my forefather replied. "You yourself do not believe what you are saying." "How can you know what power of faith I have?" "One who creates will never bring himself in to entreat. One who creates is capable of giving of himself. You, on the other hand, are one who entreats, which means you are already well within the shell of unbelief." My forefather went through the door, which at once shut behind him. Later, following the high priest's orders, the entrance was walled up. Once a day my forefather was handed food through a small opening. The rations were meager, and he was not always given enough water. As the day approached when the throngs of people were to gather before the tower to hear the new tales and songs, For 3 days my forefather was allowed no food, only water. That was on the order of the high priest, a change from his original decree. He gave this new water so that my forefather would become weak and not be able to sing any new creative songs to the crowd. When the multitude of people gathered in front of the tower, my forefather went out to greet them from the platform up above. He gave the waiting throng a cheerful look. As to what had happened to him, he breathed not a word. He simply sang. His voice rang forth in a song of rejoicing, and an extraordinary image was born. The people who had gathered to hear him paid close attention. Directly he finished his songs, he began a new one. The singer stood and sang from his high platform the whole day long. As the day drew to a close, he announced to the whole throng, "With the new dawn you will hear new songs," and on the following day he sang again. The people were unaware that the singer, imprisoned as he was in the tower, was no longer being given even water by the priests. Listening to Anastasia's account of her distant forefather, I wanted to hear at least one of the songs he sang, and I asked, "Anastasia, if you can reproduce in such detail like that all the scenes from the life of your forebears, couldn't you sing a song too? The song of your forefather sang to the people from the tower." "I can hear all these songs myself, but a full and accurate translation of them is impossible. Many of the words simply do not exist in today's language, and many of the words used back then have a different meaning now. Not only that, but it is difficult to reproduce the poetic rhythms of that time in the word combinations we have today." "Pity. I very much wanted to hear those songs." "You shall hear them, Vladimir. They will rise again." "What do you mean they'll rise again? You just said a translation is impossible." "A full and accurate translation, yes, is impossible. But it is possible to create new songs in the same spirit and with the same meaning. Bards are creating them right now, using words familiar to everyone today. The final song my forefather sang back then, you have already heard." "Heard? Where did I hear it? When?" "A bard from Yegorivsk sent it to you." "He sent me a lot of songs." "Yes, he did, but one of them is very similar to my forefather's final song." "But how could that have happened?" "Times have their own continuity, Vladimir." "So what kind of song is it? What words does it contain?" "You will understand in just a moment. I shall explain everything in order." Chapter 17. When Fathers Will Understand. On the third day, my forefather once more climbed up to the platform with the dawn. He stood there smiling, looking at the throng of people. He was looking for someone specific in the crowd. Itinerant singers waved at him in greeting and raised their instruments, and their strings vibrated under the singers' inspired hands. My forefather kept smiling at them, while at the same time he scanned the crowd even more carefully. My forefather wanted to see his son, to see the son born to his loved one 19 years earlier in the forest. Suddenly, out of the crowd, he heard a resounding young voice. "Tell me, O great poet and master of the song, you are standing up there high above everyone. I am down here, but why do you seem so close to me, as though you were my father?" And their dialogue was heard by all around. "Why, young man, do you not know your own father?" inquired the singer from the platform above. "I am 19 years old, and I have not seen my father even once. I live with my mother alone in the forest. My father left us before I was born." "First tell me, young man, how do you see the world around you?" "The world is splendid, with its rosy dawn and the setting sun drawing the day to a close. Marvelous and multifaceted it is. But people are crassly perverting the beauty of the earth and causing each other to suffer." From the high tower came the voice in reply. "Perhaps your father left you because he was ashamed before you, ashamed of the world into which he brought you. Your father left, aiming to make the world a more splendid place for you." "And so, did my father believe that he would be able to make over the world all by himself?" The day will come when all fathers will understand that they are the ones given the responsibility for the world in which their children live. The day will come when every father will face the fact that before bringing his beloved child into the world, he must act to make the world a happier place. And you as well must give thought to the world in which your own offspring will live. Tell me, young man, how soon is your chosen girl to give birth to the one which she has conceived? In the forest where I live, I have no chosen girl. The world there is splendid. I have a host of friends. But I still have not yet met a girl who is willing to go with me into my world, a world I cannot leave. Well then, even if you have not yet seen your chosen girl, so fine. You still have a space of time to make the world into at least a little more joyful place for your future girl or boy. I shall devote myself to that, just like my father. You are no longer a growing lad. You have flowing within you the blood of a fine young man, a future poet and master of the song. Sing to the throng about your splendid world. Come, you and I together shall join in song. We shall sing along together of the splendid world of the future. Who can sing when your own voice is so resounding, O poet and master of the song? I tell you, young man, you shall be able to sing that way as well. I shall sing the first line, the second is your verse. Only sing it out boldly, as I have told you, my poet. My forefathers sang from the high tower. Over the heads of the assembled throng of the voice soared forth with rejoicing, and out came the line. I arise, and the dawn smiles, befriending. And from the throng standing below, all at once a pure and resonant voice, not yet self-confident, carried on. I walk miles, and the birds sing above. And after each line of the fathers came that of the son, and sometimes their voices blended as one, and a resonant song of joy resounded all around. And this day will have never an ending, because ever more deeply I love. At that point the young man found his confidence, and with rank ecstasy sang on. Along the sun's road with light footsteps a-stealing, I enter my father's ground. My eyes see the path, but my feet have no feeling. My happiness now knows no bounds. I remember my seeing this all once before time, the flowers, the trees, and the sky. Back then I could see only pain and misfortune, but now you are everywhere and nigh. It's all still the same, the bright stars and the birdies, but I look at them differently now. I have no more sorrow, I feel no more hurtings. I love all you people, oh wow. The voice from the tower grew fainter and fainter, and before long, it could not be heard at all. The singer in the tower momentarily lost his balance, but quickly regained it, and smiling at the people once more. And right up to the end, he noticed how his son's voice was ever stronger than before, the voice of his son, now master of the song, standing below in the throng. When the song was ended, my forefather, from his position on the tower platform, waved farewell to the throng. To conceal himself from human eyes, he descended 5 steps on the staircase inside the tower from the platform doorway. He was becoming weaker and losing consciousness, but he perked up his hearing to the limit. From the wind, he could just catch the words fervently whispered to the young singer by a young and beautiful girl. Allow me, young man, allow me. I shall follow you. I shall go with you into your splendid world. There on the stone steps of the walled-up tower, my forefather was fast losing consciousness. He had a smile on his face as he awaited death. With his last breath, his lips whispered, "The line will continue. You will find bliss in a circle of happy children, my beloved." My foremother heard him in her heart. Over thousands of years to come, poet after poet would repeat the words of the song of my 2 forefathers, and the words and phrases of that song were reborn all by themselves among poets of various times and lands. They have sounded forth in many tongues. These simple words conveyed truth, and they broke through an artifice and dogma. and now once again they are heard today. Whoever deciphers their lines, not with the mind but with the heart, will learn great wisdom. And was there some sort of special meaning in the other songs your forefather sang from the tower? I asked. Why would he give his life just for some songs? My forefather, Vladimir, created many images in his songs. They later built a state and maintained it for a long time. It was these songs that helped the priests, the descendants of those first priests, to create a multitude of religions and take power in different lands. But there was just one thing the priests did not know when they decided to use their power for selfish ends. The priests did not know how to make the images work for them in perpetuity. The image lost their power when the priests tried to subject them to their own selfish pride. The ones... Hold on there, Anastasia. There's something I fail to understand about the images. Forgive me, Vladimir, for my lack of clarity. Now I shall try to let go, pull myself together, and tell you, all in its proper order, about the most important of all sciences, the science of imagery, it is called. All our ancient and modern sciences are derived from it. The priests split it up into parts so as to conceal the most important thing. In an effort to maintain their power over everything on the earth in perpetuity, passing on their knowledge of it to their descendants in underground temples by word of mouth, they tried to preserve the secret with such zeal that their modern-day priest descendants have been afforded only a tiny fraction of that science. But back then, when it all began, things were going considerably better for the priesthood. And just how did it all begin? Tell me everything right from the start. Yes, of course. I somehow got excited once more. I must tell you everything in order. The conscious awareness of this powerful science began with the songs resounding forth from the tower. Chapter 18. He celebrated the joy of life. When my forefather sang from the high tower, images were born from his songs. The throngs standing below included singers and musicians, and all the priests of the time took their places with solemn dignity amidst the multitude. The priests feared most of all that some image exposing and incriminating them might be born in those songs, that my forefather might recall how the priests imprisoned him in the tower. But from his position on the platform high on the walled-up tower, the singer sang only songs of joy. He painted a picture of a righteous ruler with whom the people could live happily ever after. And he offered an image of wise priests, and he depicted the country of the people living in it as fruitful and prosperous. No one was exposed or incriminated, but in his songs the joy of life was celebrated. The priests, who for the past 19 years had been studying the science of imagery, probably realized more than the rest what the singer was doing. They kept watching people's faces and saw how their eyes lit up with inspiration. They watched how the poet's lips moved and the musicians quietly fingered the strings of their instruments in time with the singer. My forefather had been singing from the high tower for 2 whole days. The priests calculated in their minds for how many 1,000 years this one person, standing there in front of everyone, was creating the future. At dawn on the 3rd day, the words of the final song rang out, which my forefather sang with his son, and when he made his final exit, the throng of people listening to them broke up and began heading for their homes. The high priest remained at his place for a long time. As he thoughtfully sat there, the priests standing silently about him noticed how his hair and even his eyebrows were turning white right before their very eyes. Then he arose and ordered the entrance to the tower to be reopened, and the entrance to the tower was opened once more. There, on the stone floor, was the poet's body lying lifeless. Only 2 meters or so separated his weakened hand from a piece of bread. Between his hand and that piece of bread, a wee little mouse ran back and forth squeaking. The wee little mouse kept begging and waiting for the poet to take his bread and share it with the creature. But the mouse itself would not touch the bread. It was waiting and hoping for the singer to revive. Upon catching sight of the people coming in, the wee little mouse jumped back toward the wall, but then ran over to the feet of the people silently standing around. The wee little mouse's two little beady eyes tried to look these people in the eye. The priest standing on the gray stone slabs of the floor took no notice of it. Then it hastily ran over to the piece of bread once more. The wee little gray mouse squeaked desperately and even dragged the piece of bread over to the lifeless body of the singer, poet, and philosopher, trying to push it into his hand. The priests buried my forefather's body with high honors in an underground temple, but they made it so nobody would take notice of his grave under the stone slab floor. And bending his gray head over my forefather's grave, the high priest said, "None of us will ever say of himself that he understood how he could create great images as you did. But you are not dead. We have but buried your body. The images you created will live on for thousands of years around and above the earth, and you are in them. Our descendants will make contact with them in their souls. Perhaps someone in some future age will be capable of learning the essence of creation, of learning what people need to become. And we must create a great and splendid doctrine, and keep it for thousands of years out of sight, until one or the other of us or our descendants discovers to what man should consecrate his great and splendid might." Chapter 19. A Secret Science. The priests created a secret science. Their doctrine was known as the Science of Imagery, and from it all other sciences have been derived. To keep the secret, the high priests divided up the whole science of imagery and caused the other priests to think in differing directions. Hence astronomy and mathematics and physics came along quite a bit later, as well as a multitude of other sciences, including the occult sciences. They were all developed for the simple purpose of drawing people's attention to individual sectors, thereby ensuring that nobody would ever be able to break through to the core of the teaching. But what kind of core are you talking about? What kind of science is it? And what does it consist of, this science of imagery that you speak of? It is a science that allows man to accelerate his thought and think in terms of images, to grasp the whole of the universe at once and penetrate a microcosm to create invisible yet living substance images, and use them to control a large community of people. Through the help of this science, a multitude of religions came about. One who had even the slightest knowledge of it possessed incredible power, and was able to conquer countries and topple kings from their thrones. And does that mean that a single individual could take over a country? Yes, that is right. And the procedure involved is very simple. Is even one fact like this known to today's historians? It is. Tell me about it. I don't remember anything like that myself. Why waste time in telling about it? If you go back and read about Rama or Krishna or Moses, you will see their creations, the creations of priests who had learnt a part of the secret science of imagery. Well, all right then, I shall read about it, about their deeds, but how shall I arrive at the essence of this science? Try telling me yourself about its essence. What did they learn about it, and how? They learned to think in terms of images, as I told you. Yes, you told me, only it's still not clear to me what connection mathematics, say, or physics has with this science. One who masters this science does not need to write out formulas, or outline, or create a variety of models. He is able to penetrate matter mentally right down to the nucleus and split an atom. But this is just a simple exercise to learn how to control people's destinies and those of the populations of various countries. Wow, I've never read anything like that. But what about the Bible? There is an example in the Old Testament when the priests were competing among themselves to see who could create the strongest images. Moses, the high priest, against the Pharaoh's high priests. Moses cast his rod down in the sight of everyone and turned it into a serpent, and the priests of the Pharaoh's court did the same thing. Then the serpent created by Moses swallowed up the other serpents. You mean to say that all actually happened? Yes. I thought somebody just made it up, or it was a kind of metaphor. Nothing made up, Vladimir. It all happened just the way the competition is described in the Old Testament. But what made them compete in front of each other like that? It was to show who could create the strongest images capable of conquering other images. And Moses proved to everyone that he was the strongest. After that, it was senseless to fight against him. Instead of fighting, they were obliged to carry out his requests. But the Pharaoh did not listen. He tried to stop the Israelites from following Moses' leadership and the image he created. But the warriors were not strong enough to stop the people of Israel, a people in which a more powerful image resided. Then you can read about how the people of Israel many times conquered other tribes and took their cities, about how the people created their own religion and nation-state. The glory of the pharaohs lost its shine. But at the time when the priests of Egypt still excelled in their creation of grand images, when they were able to determine what consequences an image they created would provoke among the people, Egypt flourished under the control of the priests. Of all the known states formed after the last global disaster, Egypt flourished the longest. No, wait a moment, Anastasia. Everybody knows that Egypt was ruled by the pharaohs. Their pyramid tombs have lasted right to the present day. Outwardly, the executive power in the country did rest with the pharaohs, but their chief task was to exemplify the image of a wise ruler. The important decisions were not taken by the pharaoh. Whenever these pharaohs tried to seize full power for themselves, the state would start deteriorating at once. Each pharaoh was, first and foremost, appointed to the throne by the priests. The pharaoh himself studied with the priests from very early childhood and endeavored to master the science of images. Only by learning its fundamentals could he hope to be appointed a pharaoh. The power structure prevalent at that time in Egypt can today be described as follows. At the very top were the secret priests, then the priests who looked after educational and judicial matters. Control of the state formally rested in the hands of a council of representatives of all the priestly ranks, while the pharaoh ruled according to their laws and did as he was told by them. The community leaders had a good deal of executive power. They were considered more or less independent. In fact, things were pretty much the same as they are today. Many nation-states have a president and government as their executive authority. Parliament, like the priests of old, makes the laws. The only difference is that today there is no provision in any country for the president to be instructed as the pharaoh was instructed by the priests. The same applies to those who hold public office today on councils, dumas, or congresses. It does not really matter by what terms today's legislator priests are called. What matters is how they, too, have nowhere to turn to learn how to become lawmakers before they actually take on the job. How can our lawmakers learn wisdom when the science of imagery is kept secret? That is why we have chaos in many nation-states. What are you trying to say, Anastasia? If we modeled our governments on the power structure that was in place in ancient Egypt, everything would have turned out for the better? The actual power structure can bring about very little in the way of change. It is much more important what stands behind it. And when it comes to the Egyptian power structure, Egypt was not ruled by it, nor by the pharaohs, nor even by the priests. Then by whom? In ancient Egypt, everything was ruled by images. Both the priests and the pharaohs subjected themselves to them. From the ancient science of imagery, a secret council composed of just a few priests took the image of the pharaoh as a just ruler. They took the image just as it appeared at that time. This secret council spent a good deal of time discussing the proper conduct for a pharaoh, his outward trappings and lifestyle. Then they taught one of the selected priests how to exemplify this image. They tried first to select a candidate from the ranks of the royalty, but But if no one of royal blood was found suitable in appearance or character, they could choose any priest and pass him off as pharaoh. The priest selected as pharaoh was always obliged to conform to the conceived image, especially during public appearances. And then each member of the public felt the invisible image hanging over him and acted according to his understanding of it. When people believed in an image, and the majority find it to their liking, each one is only too happy to follow it, and the state has no need to set up a huge official surveillance apparatus. Such a state can only grow stronger and flourish. But if that were so, then no state today could get by without images. And yet they do get by, and they are alive and flourishing. Just look at America or Germany, and our own Soviet Union before Perestroika. What a tremendous state! Without an image, Vladimir, no state can get by, even today. Today, it is only the state in which the governing image is most acceptable to the majority of people that flourishes, compared to other states. Then who is creating this image today? After all, there are no priests around anymore, at least not the kind ancient Egypt had. There are still such priests today, only now they are called by another name, and have within them less and less the science of imagery. Today's priests are not able to make impartial and long-term calculations, not able to set a goal and create a worthy image capable of drawing a whole country to that goal. What are you talking about, Anastasia? What kind of priests or images were there in our Soviet Union? Everything back then was controlled by the Bolsheviks. First Lenin, then Stalin was in charge. Then came other first secretaries. They had the Politburo. Religion was pretty much eliminated back then. They even destroyed the temples. And here you go carrying on about priests. Vladimir, take a closer look. What was there before the state which came to be known as the Soviet Union emerged? What do you mean, what was there? Everybody knows it was the Tsarist regime. Then along came the revolution, and we went down the path of socialism, at the same time trying to build communism. But before the revolution actually took place, the image of a new and just system of governance with a bright outlook was already circulating among the people, and the old system was being exposed. After all, initially, it was the image of a new state that was being formed, along with the image of a new ruler who would be most benevolent to everyone, and the image of everyone leading a happy life. It was images such as these that led people on and motivated them to fight against those who were still loyal to the old images. And both the revolution and the civil war, which followed it, a war which involved multitudes of people, were in fact a conflict between two competing images. Of course, there might well be something in what you say, I admitted. Only Lenin and Stalin weren't images. Everybody knows they were merely human beings who happened to be leaders of their country. You bring up these names, thinking that behind them stood simply people in the flesh. In fact, perhaps, if you think about it, you will see that it was very far from being that way, Vladimir. How could it not be that way? I'm telling you, everybody knows that Stalin was a man. Then tell me, Vladimir, what sort of man was Stalin? What sort? The sort, well, in the beginning everybody thought of him to be kind and just. Someone who loved children. There were photos and portraits of him holding a little girl in his arms. Thousands of soldiers went into battle crying, "For the motherland! For Stalin!" Everyone wept when he died. My mother used to tell me that when he died practically the whole country wept. And they placed him in the mausoleum next to Lenin. So that means that a great many people loved him and triumphed in deadly conflicts with their enemies in his name. They dedicated poems to him. But what do they say about him today? Today they say he was a bloodthirsty tyrant and a murderer. He let multitudes of people rot in prisons. They unceremoniously removed his body from the mausoleum and buried it in the ground and destroyed all the monuments to him along with the books he once wrote. Now do you understand? You see before you two different images, two images but the same man, the same. So, what kind of man was he? Can you tell me now? I guess I can't. Can you tell me anything yourself? Stalin, as a man, corresponded to neither of these two images, before or after, and therein lay the tragedy for the nation. There has always been tragedy in states where a significant discrepancy has come up between the ruler and his image. That is where all national troubles have begun, and in these times of trouble people have fought for the images with the gun. It is only recently that people were still attracted to the image of communism, but the image of communism has deteriorated. And now, what are you and everybody else in the nation attracted to? Now we are building, well, capitalism. Maybe, or maybe something else. But just so that we can live the way they do in the developed countries, like America or Germany, for instance. Anyway, so that we can have democracy like they have over there, and an abundance of everything. Now you are identifying the image of your country and a just ruler with the image of those other countries you name. Okay, let's say it's the image of those countries. But is that not admitting that the knowledge of the priests in your own country has completely diminished? There is no knowledge left. They have no more power to create a worthy image capable of leading people in its path. As a rule, any state in such a situation has been a dying state, as thousands of years of history attest. But what's wrong with our starting to live the way they do, say in America or Germany? Take a closer look at how many problems there are in the countries you name. Ask yourself why they need such huge police forces and great numbers of hospitals, and why there are more and more suicides there. And where do people from the rich big cities go for their holidays? And they constantly require increasingly greater numbers of officials to watch over the public. All this means that their images are deteriorating too. And what is the result? That we are attracted to their deteriorating images? Yes, the result is that we are thereby prolonging their life, but not by very much. When they destroyed the leading images in your country, they did not create any new image in its place, and everyone was allured by an image that was prevalent in a foreign country. If they all kept bowing down to it, then your country will cease to exist. It is a country which is losing its own image. But who is able to create such an image today? We don't have any Egyptian-style priests. There are people even today who are wholly involved in creating images and determining the ability of images to attract a nation's people, and their calculations are frequently quite accurate. For some reason, I've never heard of such people. Or is it all top secret? You, like a great many people, come into contact with what they do on a daily basis. Oh, where? When? Vladimir, remember, when the time comes to elect new deputies to the Duma, or to select a single ruler out of several candidates, he's called a president today. How their image is presented to the people, and those images are put together by people who have chosen image-making as their profession. Each candidate has several such people working for him, and the winner is the one whose image is the most favorable to the majority of voters. What do you mean, image? These are all real live people. They get up on the hustings in front of voters and even go on TV themselves. Of course, they appear themselves, only they always get advised as to where they should go, how they should behave, what they should say, so as to fit the image most favorable to the people. And, more often than not, the candidates heed this advice. In addition, a variety of advertisements are made up for them, attempting to associate their image with a better life for all. Yes, they do advertise. All the same, I don't really know what's more important, the man himself who wants to become a deputy or president, or the image you keep talking about. Of course, the man is always more important, but when you vote for him, after all, you probably have not had the opportunity to meet with him. You do not know in detail what he is actually like. You are voting for the image which has been served up to you. But each candidate still has a platform, and people vote for the platform. How often are those platforms carried out once the candidate is elected? Well, not all pre-election platforms are carried out by any means, but maybe none of them ever gets fully carried out because the other people with their platforms of their own get in the way. So each time it turns out that a multitude of images is created, but there is no complete unity among them. There is no single image capable of attracting everyone and leading them to a goal. There is no image. If there's no image, then there is no inspiration and no clear path. Life becomes ad hoc and chaotic. Then who is capable of creating such an image? Priests of wisdom, we've seen, there simply aren't any today. And as for Science of Imagery, which your forefather taught the priests of old, well, I'm learning about that for the first time from you. There is not much longer to wait. The country shall have a strong image. It will end all wars, and people's dreams in splendid clarity will start coming into birth. First in your country, and then all over the earth.